Heartwarming plea from a little girl to a U.S. Marine goes viral. Discover the unexpected change. Lily sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, clutching a faded picture of her father in his Marine uniform. Clouds rolled in outside, casting a gloom that matched the storm brewing in her heart. Just days away from his deployment, dread wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, squeezing out her breath. Pride swirled within her, a bright ember amid a cacophony of fear. Why did it have to hurt so much? Why couldn't she just feel proud without being scared? In the small Texas town she called home, voices echoed in the house. Her mother whispered anxieties into the phone, and every once in a while, the worried tones seeped into Lily's world. Bills piled up like dark waves crashing on the shore of their lives. Each bill bore a mark of worry, a reminder of her mother's struggle. Here, pride battled with nagging fear. It was a fight Lily felt unaccustomed to, and not in control of. She wondered if other kids felt this way, but it was hard to focus on anything but her pangs, pressing down harder with each passing hour. Overwhelmed, Lily fled to her room, the only sanctuary that felt safe. As the wind howled outside, mirroring her thoughts, she took a gulp of air, forcing herself not to cry. In a moment of clarity, she grabbed a colorful piece of paper and began to write. Each scrawled word held the weight of her heart. "Dear Daddy," she penned. "I'm scared and proud." The words flowed like rain, splattering on the paper, each sentence an exposure of her deepest fears and untamed love. Would he think of her when times got tough? Would he come home safe? Before she could second guess, she slipped her letter into an envelope marked for the Marine base and felt a flash of relief, a fleeting moment of hope. The thunder outside rumbled ominously as she sealed it, but in her gut, she knew she would never be the same after this storm. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But the next day, her heartfelt words escaped confinement. An accidental share, an unintended vulnerability, and suddenly Lily's letter became a lifeline tossed into a wide, tumultuous sea. It hooked attention, catching more hearts than she could fathom. Families rallied to show solidarity, some sending messages of support even from far-off states, igniting a fire she never dreamed could light. Yet her mother felt the burden growing heavier as bills threatened to sink them beneath despair. Anxiety clawed at her, both protective of Lily and essential as the lifeblood supporting their family. Each casserole from the neighbors was a reminder of their struggles, a present that came with strings of her own internal conflict, leaving Lily aching to contribute, to help her realize that love alone couldn't shield them from hard truths. On one restless night, when the walls felt like they were closing in, Lily woke to find her mother staring at bills. A mix of desperation and determination rose in her chest. I can do something, she thought. She had to fight the weight of their burdens. But could a little girl really change anything? An idea sparked inside her, like the first light of dawn breaking through, but also a gnawing fear that it could all fall apart before she even began. As the clouds of uncertainty swirled in her mind, she clutched the prospect of her fundraiser tightly, battling the doubts that threatened to overwhelm her. Would it make a difference? Would her mother bless her efforts with pride, or would the shadows loom larger still? A question echoed in her spirit, heavier than any other. Could a little girl's love truly bridge the war-torn distance between her family, or would the sacrifices demanded by separation tear them apart? Lily stared at the single piece of paper now in her hand, the ink still fresh with the determination that had surged through her veins just moments before. A fundraiser. It was a simple idea, yet daunting. Would she have the courage to turn her vision into something real? Every ounce of her being screamed for action, but self-doubt crept in like a shadow, whispering questions louder than the resolve in her heart. What if no one comes? That dark thought clawed at her. The idea of people looking at her with pity rather than admiration chilled her resolve. Yet what was riskier, doing nothing or taking a leap of faith? She was already scared. She might as well make that fear palpable. Plans unfolded in her mind like an origami crane, intricate and beautiful, yet fragile. She took a deep breath and thought back to her letter. The response had been overwhelming, like a tidal wave crashing onto shore. If a few heartfelt words could touch so many, maybe a fundraiser could ignite hope and support within her community. Lily grabbed her notebook, drafting a list of potential ways to raise funds. Bake sales, car washes, yard sales. The ideas tumbled out in a frenzy, each one bursting with possibility. That very Saturday, Lily decided to recruit help. If she could get a few friends involved, maybe the project wouldn't feel so insurmountable. She approached Emma and Sarah during recess, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. "I have an idea!" She could barely contain her excitement as they crowded around her, curiosity shining in their eyes. She pitched her plan, watching as their brows furrowed with contemplation. "You want to host a bake sale?" Emma asked, skepticism creeping into her cautious tone. "What if we just end up with a bunch of leftover cookies?" "It can't be that bad," Lily countered, her voice mingling with the energy of young ambition. "We can tell everyone why we're doing it. They'll want to help. Plus, we can make it fun." A quiet moment stretched as each weighed their options. Sarah smiled. "When I bake cookies, Mom always says they're the best. I want to help." The affirmative thumb up from her only bolstered Lily's confidence. The moment of unity sparked something built on pure energy, an outburst of positivity infectious enough to fuel her determination. In the days leading up to their bake sale, excitement buzzed through the air like electricity. Together they enlisted more friends, spreading the word about their cause. The day of the event saw a flurry of activity. Laughter, chatter, and the sweet scent of baked goods filled the alley behind the school where they set up their makeshift stand. But through the joyful atmosphere, a nagging thought lingered. Every smiling face reminded her of the emptiness lurking back at home. Her mother's burden weighed heavily on her heart, and despite the festive energy, questions floated just below her surface. Would this be enough? Was she doing it for the right reasons? Or just to escape the reality of unease? As the morning melted into afternoon, customers began to trickle in, smiling, grabbing treats with laughter as a form of currency. Each transaction felt monumental, the sound of coins clinking fitting perfectly into the rhythm of their success. Yet there was an ache in her gut, a slight trembling of anticipation mixed with fear. She watched the flow of faces and wondered if the funds would make it back home, alleviate the stresses that loomed over their family, or if this was just a temporary fix to a deeper problem. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the last of their goodies, she caught a glimpse of her mother approaching, uncertainty written on her face, yet there was a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. What would she say? Would her mother embrace her efforts, recognizing it as a step towards hope and growth? Or would the strain of reality cloud the joyful moment? Lily stood tall, her heart racing with every breath, poised at the crossroads of her dreams. The moment had arrived, and she was ready to meet whatever came next head-on. What awaited her in that moment of vulnerability? The uncertainty shimmered, tangible in the air around her. Lily's heart pounded as she stood there, a whirlpool of emotions threatening to spill over. Her mother took measured steps toward her, an aura of hesitance weaving between them. The crowd buzzed with energy, yet all the noise faded into a muffled hum. This singular moment stretched taut in front of her, a ribbon of tension pulled between hope and anxiety. "Hey, Mom!" she called out, forcing a smile to mask her vulnerability. As her mother drew closer, the tightness in Lily's chest loosened ever so slightly. "Hi, sweetie," her mother replied with a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "What's all this?" Lily gestured to the colorful display of baked goods, each carefully crafted with love and intention. "We're raising money to help with, well, everything," she stumbled, unsure of how to phrase their struggles without making them unbearable. "I thought if we could gather some support, maybe we could lighten your load a little." A flicker of surprise crossed her mother's face. For a moment, it appeared as if she might say something encouraging, something that would validate Lily's effort. But then the shadows of their reality crept back in, and her expression closed off. Nice, Lily. But I hope you're not putting too much pressure on yourself. Pressure? Lily's stomach twisted. Here she was trying to take initiative, and her mother treated it as if it were burdensome instead of empowering. Mom, I really believe we can make a difference. Just a little can help, and it doesn't have to be perfect, she replied, the conviction cutting through her nervousness. Sweetie, her mother began, but Lily interrupted, propelled by a sudden spark of realization. She had to confront the limitations that seemed to define their situation. What if we focus on what we can do instead of what we can't? The words tumbled out, a challenge to both her mother and herself. We can't change everything overnight, but we can take little steps. Isn't that worth something? The silence that followed felt heavy, yet Lily didn't retreat. Her finger traced the edge of a cookie box, a tangible representation of what she was fighting for. You don't have to carry this alone, she continued, eyes locked onto her mother's. I'm here, trying to help, and I want you to see it as something we can do together. Her mother's face softened, and for a moment, conflict flickered within her gaze, revealing layers of grief and fear that had trapped them both. I appreciate your heart, Lily, but sometimes things are more complicated than they seem. The words hovered in the air, sour notes in an otherwise sweet melody. No, Lily said, her voice rising slightly as she found the strength in her determination. They might be complicated, but we can't let that stop us. I need you to believe in this as much as I do. In that moment, she realized the power of her words, the way they surged from a place within her she didn't know existed. She had become a catalyst for change, refusing to let fear weigh her down any longer. But the question loomed. What if her efforts truly weren't enough? The thought gnawed at her mind, cutting through newfound confidence like winter air. As they stood facing each other, a stirring tension brewed. Would her mother come around, see the light Lily was trying to shine? The uncertainty wrapped around them, and Lily braced herself for what might be an uphill battle. Then, breaking the standoff, her mother hesitated. A hint of something, perhaps hope, glimmered in her eyes. All right, she whispered softly. Let's talk about it. What's our next step? But just as relief began to wash over Lily, her father's voice echoed from down the alley and jolted her back to reality. You two, get over here, you won't believe who just showed up. The interruption shattered the fragile moment. As Lily looked past her mother, a sense of foreboding filled her. What awaited them would change everything, yet there was no retreating now. With steely resolve, Lily took a step forward, knowing they were on the brink of a pivotal shift, both in her fundraiser and in her fractured home life. What lay ahead in this new chapter of uncertainty and discovery was yet to be seen. Driven by an unyielding spirit, she had to face whatever would come next head-on. The stakes just became infinitely higher. The cacophony of the crowd receded further, as Lily followed her mother's gaze down the alleyway, where her father's voice had echoed with unexpected urgency. Her heart danced nervously in her chest, fighting against the reality she had just begun to navigate with her mother. The flickering hope she felt seconds ago dimmed under the weight of anticipation. Who could possibly be arriving now? Let's go, her mother said, a mix of curiosity and hesitation threading through her voice. As they moved toward the commotion, Lily sensed her mother's tension getting edged with something closer to curiosity. Maybe there was room for some joy amidst their struggles after all. They pushed through the gathering crowd, and Lily's eyes darted from face to face, trying to discern what was shifting the atmosphere from mundane to something charged and electric. Then she saw him, a tall figure standing apart, his uniform crisply pressed against the vibrant backdrop of standing booths and banners. A U.S. Marine, freshly back from deployment. Lily felt an inexplicable pull toward the man. Instinctively, she felt a connection, as if this soldier embodied resilience and hope. "Daddy?" she called, her voice rising above the low murmur. Her father's face lit up as he reached the Marine, wrapping him in an embrace that signaled an unspoken array of emotions. There was pride in his stance that seemed momentarily contagious, feeding energy into the room. "Lily, come here. You have to meet Sergeant Jameson," her father beckoned, waving her over. As she approached, hesitation crept in again. What could a soldier possibly mean to her right now? But as she reached them, The Marine's warm smile and the sincerity in his eyes disarmed her. "Hey there," he said, kneeling slightly to meet her eye level. "I can't believe how brave you are to take a stand for your family. Your dad was just telling me how you organized this whole thing." Lily felt a swell of pride at his words, bolstering the belief in her heart that maybe her efforts could have impact. "I just wanted to help," she managed, her voice gaining strength. "Helping is the first step to leading. You've got what it takes, kiddo," he said, his eyes sparkling with genuine encouragement. The gravity of the moment hit her like a drumbeat in her chest, an echo of her own sentiments resounding in his unfamiliar yet supportive tone. "Lily has a lot of ideas," her father interjected, beaming with pride. "We're brainstorming ways to raise money and build support for the family." They exchanged small talk, and as the conversation unfolded, Lily absorbed the details of the Marine service, the sacrifices he had made, and how reaching out to the community had been vital in his own journey. It was the exhilarating realization of shared purpose, a spark of motivation ignited within her that made the uncertainty of their situation less daunting. But as the banter sought to lighten the moment, a deeper conversation loomed just beneath the surface. What if she adopted his fortitude? What if she could lead her family through the storm? Just when she began to feel the momentum building within her, the Marine turned serious. Reaching out to others is brave, but it requires strength to ask for help. Sometimes, that's the hardest part. His words pierced through her burgeoning confidence, leaving a prickle of uncertainty in their wake. This wasn't merely about baking goods and gatherings. It extended far beyond into vulnerability and wider connections, forcing her to confront her apprehensions about seeking support from the very community she was aiming to uplift. Lily shivered slightly at the realization, her heart tugging toward responsibility and actionable steps. A sense of urgency welled inside of her, a question of whether she could really nurture this change, whether her voice would be strong enough to rally more than just her family. "Thank you, Sergeant," she said, swallowing hard against the uncertainty that churned within, but resolved to push it aside. "I will." "Remember," he interjected gently, "it's about taking the first step." Something surged within her. She needed to transform this moment into evolution. Encouraged and terrified all at once, Lily glanced at her parents and then back at the Marine. The moment stretched endlessly, emotions swirling like leaves caught in a gale. As the crowd began to disperse, she realized she was standing at the apex of a choice. It was time to confront the very uncertainties she feared yet felt drawn to explore. But just as she prepared to voice her newfound resolve, the realization crashed in on her. The next right step demanded more than courage. It required vulnerability, a quality she desperately needed to nurture. Who knows where this will lead, she pondered, realizing the weight of her commitments. What if she could transform her fear and hesitation into an opening for growth? What if her next steps opened a doorway to change not just in their lives, but in others as well? The unanswered questions buzzed in her mind, the shimmering excitement in her chest mingling with doubt. For once, the future felt close, yet intimidating. The time had come to define what her voice would mean, not just for her family, but for a larger connection to others. With each breath, a latent determination unfurled within her, ushering in a new chapter. However, that new beginning awaited her decision. Would she dare to move forward and let herself truly be seen? The air was thick with anticipation as Lily pondered the gravity of her next steps. The Marine's words echoed in her mind, a subtle but urgent reminder that the journey ahead required more than just good intentions. It demanded the courage to reveal her vulnerabilities, a thought both terrifying and liberating. As she walked back with her parents, a fierce resolve started to crystallize within her. The dying light of the day cast long shadows on the street, mirroring the fears that constantly threatened to engulf her. What if she spoke up? What if she became the voice not just for herself, but for others who might also be navigating their silent storms? Later that evening, while her parents prepared dinner, Lily retreated into her room, the walls lined with her sketches and childhood dreams. She felt the familiar comfort there, yet tonight, it felt inadequate against the weight of possibility. Flopping onto her bed, she pulled out her notebook, flipping to a blank page. This could be the canvas for her next move, a place for her thoughts to take shape. But as she stared at the page, the familiar wrestling match between self-doubt and determination played out in her mind. Were her ideas worth sharing? Would anyone care? She needed to summon the audacity to ask for help, and that required a different kind of strength. With a determined scribble, she drafted the beginnings of a letter, an open invitation to the community that encompassed her neighbors, friends, and those who had shared similar struggles. Words flowed through her pencil, some buoyant, others hesitant. She spoke to their hearts, weaving hope into each line while anchoring her own intentions. She wanted them to know she understood their plight, that she, too, was reaching for something beyond her grasp. Dear friends, I'm writing to share something close to my heart. Many of us face challenges that feel too big to handle alone. The letter resonated with her, blossoming into a source of empowerment. Drafting it transformed her isolation into a collective mission, and the act of writing became a practice in vulnerability she had never embraced before. As the words filled the pages, she recognized the flickering flame of resolve burning brighter inside her. This was her first step into the unknown, the courageous leap into vulnerability that Sergeant Jameson had spoken about. But doubts crept in again. What if no one responded? Would her efforts go unnoticed? She paused, the pencil hovering above the paper. The thought of silence sent a shiver down her spine, yet it was juxtaposed with the yearning deep within her to connect, to make a difference, no matter how small. Hour after hour slipped away as Lily meticulously crafted her message, infusing it with authenticity. Each word felt like armor against the lingering doubts. Every phrase transformed her trepidation into resolve. When she finally concluded the letter with an invitation for an open meeting to discuss ideas for collective support, a wave of exhilaration washed over her. Holding it in her hands felt surreal. She was no longer just a girl caught in a web of uncertainty. She was taking actionable steps toward leadership, bold in her new path forward. The next morning, she faced a new dilemma. How to distribute her letter without trembling hands betraying her confidence. The thought of sharing this deeply personal spark with others suddenly felt monumental. Would she be able to stand in front of everyone, not just as Lily but as the hopeful leader she aspired to be? As she slipped out the door, letter in hand, apprehension knotted in her stomach. The community hall loomed ahead, a hub of connection pulsating with potential. Steeling herself, she approached, her breaths shallow yet resolute. This was it. A confrontation with the unknown. She would step outside of the shadows of doubt and into the light of possibility. But the overwhelming question loomed, a test of her emotional strength. Would she dare to speak her truth? With each deliberate step, the urgency built within her, and as she reached for the door, a thunderous heartbeat of determination surged through her veins. A sudden thought struck her. What if she could empower others to do the same? What if they could join her in this leap toward connection? Her heart raced as she pushed the door open, ready for whatever awaited her inside. It was time to confront her fears, to take that leap. Would this be the moment when she truly became visible? The bell above the door chimed softly as Lily stepped into the community hall, a delicate sound oblivious to the turmoil swirling within her. The vast room was filled with the murmur of voices, yet it felt achingly quiet to her. She was suddenly acutely aware of how her heart hammered in her chest, every pulse echoing her apprehension. Like a tidal wave, a mix of excitement and fear flooded her senses. She scanned the room, searching for familiar faces. A few acquaintances stood in clusters. Their laughter contrasted sharply with her inward anxiety. These people were in her life, yet here she was, feeling like a stranger on the precipice of vulnerability. The thought tugged at her. She stood at a crucial crossroads, yet nothing about this felt ordinary. With a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and clutched the letter against her chest. Each line she had meticulously crafted now felt like a burden. What if she stumbled over her words? What if they dismissed her plea as naive? She imagined the cautious murmurs, the awkward glances. No. This wasn't the time for retreat. It was merely a moment to prove her resilience, a trait she had long been too timid to acknowledge. Clenching her jaw, she made her way to a makeshift podium at the front of the hall, each step purposeful yet heavy with doubt. An unexpected surge of empowerment washed over her as she placed the letter down on the podium, her fingers lingering on the paper. With the spotlight figuratively glaring at her, she realized this wasn't just about her message. It was about their collective stories. They all carried burdens, after all. She cleared her throat, her heart racing as the chatter gradually dimmed. Silence enveloped the room, the same silence that had once suffocated her. She had to push past the gnawing hesitation. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice shaking ever so slightly. "I'm Lily." The sound of her own name grounded her. "I wrote a letter," she continued, forcing herself to look at them rather than fixate on the floor. "About the challenges we all face, and how together we can find a way to support each other." As she spoke, she felt a flicker of connection. It grew stronger with each word she uttered. She shared her own struggles, her battles with insecurity and self-doubt, weaving her narrative into the fabric of their shared experiences. Those vulnerabilities transformed into a bridge, allowing her to connect with them in a way she had never anticipated. Glancing around, she noticed varied expressions: intrigue, concern, understanding. The apprehension slowly began to dissipate within her. She found clarity in the honesty of her disclosure. Each revelation about her own fears illuminated the room, turning her vulnerability into a beacon of shared experience. By the time she mentioned the invitation for an open meeting, she was breathing more easily. Each smile, each nod from her audience reinforced her resolve. This was not just about gathering people. This was her attempt to spark something within them all, to ignite a conversation that could lead to true understanding and support. But as she wrapped up, uncertainty crept back in. Would they truly feel inspired to join her? Could she rely on their willingness to share their stories too? The query weighed heavily upon her, a sudden chill clawing at her enthusiasm. "Well," Lily concluded, attempting to mask her lingering apprehension, "if you are interested in talking more, I'll be around after this." She stepped back, feeling exposed. Yet she had done it. She had taken action. As some members began to approach her, their faces inviting and open, anticipation rippled through her. But then she spotted someone lurking at the back, arms crossed, a disapproving expression etched upon his face. Her breath caught. He was known to her, a skeptic who thrived on questioning the motives of others, a shadow who had discouraged many in the past. Lily's pulse quickened. The moment of truth loomed. Would he challenge her? Would he be the obstacle that shut down her burgeoning confidence? Her earlier exhilaration transformed into determination anew as she braced herself for what might unfold. Was this where her journey would truly begin? With every ounce of courage she possessed, she prepared herself for confrontation. Would she be able to stand her ground, hold true to her message, and emerge even stronger? The room felt charged as Lily's eyes locked onto the figure at the back. His name was Ethan, a man known in their small community for his sharp tongue and cynical worldview. Sizing him up from her vantage point, Lily could see the faint smirk on his face, a reaction that made her skin prickle. Did he find her vulnerability amusing? Would he dismantle the fragile connection she'd just begun to weave? As several other attendees approached her with curiosity and encouragement, she gave them brief smiles, keeping her focus momentarily on Ethan. No longer could she allow fear to dictate her progress. Instead of retreating into self-doubt, she resolved to confront the skepticism head-on. After all, confronting negativity was another step toward her own development, another chance to assert her message. "That's a bold statement, isn't it, Lily?" Ethan's voice carried through the hall, sharp and probing. He stepped forward, arms still crossed, challenging her directly. "You think mere conversation can fix anything? This place is full of people who've tried and failed. What makes you so different?" Lily's heart raced, her stomach churning with uncertainty. He was right in some ways. The struggle was real, and discussions often felt meaningless when the results were absent. But she remembered the emotions that had sparked her to speak. She found strength in her resolve. "I'm not claiming that talking will solve everything, Ethan," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "But it's a start. We all hide behind our struggles, and if we never talk about them, then how can we even begin to understand one another? I think that's a step worth taking." His skepticism didn't waver, but she noticed a flicker of interest in his eyes, something deeper than mere ridicule. Maybe, just maybe, she was striking a chord. "You're naive if you think this will change anything," he countered. But there was a slight crack in his tone, perhaps more rhetorical than confrontational. It was almost as if he was rooting for her failure, hoping to expose her naivety. Yet, it invoked a fire within her. "Maybe I am," she acknowledged, her confidence growing with each word. "But being naive is better than doing nothing at all. I'd rather try, no matter how foolish, than remain silent." Ethan raised an eyebrow, surprised. The crowd behind her had slowly gathered, their murmurs turning to focused silence as they observed this unfolding exchange. With every beat of her heart, she felt the onlookers' energy morphing from apprehension to intrigue. Lily could sense the support mounting, an unarticulated understanding wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. The discomfort of confrontation began to transform into a challenge that ignited her determination. This was her moment, not just to advocate for herself, but to rally others not just around her words, but behind the idea that vulnerability could lead to strength. "What if I told you," she continued, "that fear is the only thing holding us back? A willingness to connect, despite how difficult it may seem, is the first step to changing our lives." Now she was questioning herself, but not in doubt. Instead, it was a challenge directed toward others. Could they also ask themselves what held them back? Ethan's expression softened slightly, and for a brief moment she almost thought she saw acknowledgement in his eyes. But the skepticism remained, unwilling to relinquish its hold entirely. As the crowd around her began to murmur supportively, the atmosphere shifted. The narrative was no longer just about confronting Ethan, but about embracing a collective doubt that had previously kept them all from engaging in deeper conversations about their struggles. Lily took a breath, feeling both vulnerable and empowered. "If you're willing to come talk to me, I want to hear your story too, Ethan," she offered genuinely. "If I'm naive, let's explore it together. Maybe together we can compare this fear and discover something worthwhile." Ethan hesitated, and the tension in the air tightened. The willingness to engage felt transformative, yet uncertainty lingered. For both of them, she sensed that this confrontation held more power than she could predict, and as Ethan opened his mouth she prepared for a response that could either reinforce her path forward or shatter her newfound resolve. What would he say next? Would he challenge her further, or could he actually become a part of her journey? The silence stretched heavy, an unspoken weight reflecting the pivotal moment they were poised to embark upon together. Ethan paused, the tension in the air crackling as he measured his response. Lily's heart raced. Did he see the potential in her invitation, or would he retreat into sarcasm? "I can't promise I know how to speak a nice conversation," he finally said, the challenge still evident in his tone, but a hint of something new flickered just beneath the surface. "But you might find that vulnerability isn't exclusively a strength. Sometimes, it can be your downfall." A ripple of murmurs echoed through the crowd, and Lily felt a bead of sweat escape down her spine. She hadn't anticipated this confrontation forcing her to confront her own interpretation of strength. With his words hanging heavily in the air, she saw the shadow of doubt creeping in, a reminder that the very act of opening up came with risks she was still grappling with. But there was also an opportunity to probe deeper into what it meant to truly be vulnerable. "Maybe that's where we differ, Ethan," Lily replied, her voice cutting through the uncertainty. "I see vulnerability as a way to sift through the facade we all wear like armor. Without peeling back those layers, we remain trapped in our own prisons of fear." Around her, the crowd leaned in, enraptured by the exchange. Each person was on the precipice of discovering their own depths, and with that came a responsibility to remain resolute. She could feel her own fire reigniting, each syllable she spoke becoming a shield against her doubts. "Are you prepared to explore that with me?" she ventured further, challenging the previous gray tones of their conversation. There was power in her question, and she felt the nerves in her stomach tighten with the possibility of connection. "I can't promise it'll lead anywhere significant, but perhaps we can start a dialogue. I want to learn from your experiences, and maybe even share mine, wherever that might take us." For a moment, it seemed as if Ethan was deliberating, torn between the comfort of his cynicism and the unpredictable vulnerability she offered. The crowd mirrored his struggle, their expressions revealing a kaleidoscope of emotions: curiosity, apprehension, hope. "Dialogue? Or just a way to stroke your ego?" he replied, a smirk resurfacing. but this time it felt less forceful. You think I'm the only one with stories that could shatter that facade of yours? I welcome it, Lily answered, her pulse quickening, emboldened by the shift in the atmosphere. Take your shot. Show me the cracks. The truth is messy, and it's often hurtful. I don't want to be coddled with soft words. I crave the raw, the real. If this conversation ends with my heart in pieces, at least we'll have started something genuine. It's where growth begins. As silence hovered, Ethan's hardened exterior seemed to give way to a sliver of intrigue. Perhaps she was capable of real engagement, of stripping away false bravados, even his. And that realization sent a pulse of excitement through her. This was an area of growth for both of them. But just as she thought she saw a shift, Ethan's brow furrowed in thought, and he appeared to weigh his options like one might balance competing forces in a game of chess. The moment lingered, taut with anticipation. Fine, he finally said, the edge of his voice slightly softened. But let's not romanticize this process. It might get ugly, and I won't hold back. Nor should you. Her resolve gathered strength, a newfound clarity radiating from her. They were both on the brink of an unknown path, one littered with uncertainties but rife with potential for transformation. This exchange was about personal growth for both of them, and she wouldn't let fear dictate the conversation any longer. As Ethan stepped closer, an air of tentative collaboration arose. Lily knew that their shared journey into uncomfortable truths could unravel long-buried secrets, maybe even fears revealing more about themselves than they bargained for. Let's start fresh then, Ethan continued, a hint of curiosity replacing derision. What do you want to tackle first? But even as she opened her mouth to respond, the growing knots of apprehension melded with excitement, reminded her that the deeper they dug, the more they might discover about themselves. Could they navigate through the turbulent waters of honesty without capsizing? In that moment she realized they were about to tread into territory that could redefine their understanding of self and connection. But would they be willing to confront their truths? The next chapter loomed, ready to challenge their perceptions, as their stories converged into a narrative neither had anticipated. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying a hint of vulnerability. The audience around them could feel the shift in energy, an almost electric buzz. Choices loomed for both of them, each one more revealing than the last. As Lily gathered her thoughts, she was acutely aware of the stakes. What I want to tackle first, she began, her voice steadier than she felt, is fear. You mentioned vulnerability being a potential downfall. What about fear? Is that not the true enemy hiding behind the armor we wear? Ethan's expression shifted, the sharpness of his gaze softening as he considered her question. It was the first time he had not retorted with a biting comment. Instead, he offered her a moment of silence, allowing her words to settle. This was the opening she needed, an opportunity to peel back the layers that cloaked them both. Fear can paralyze us, he finally replied, his tone carrying an unexpected weight. But it can also motivate us. I've always viewed it as a necessary tool for survival. For me, fear is an ally. I harness it, control it. It's powerful. He paused, and for the first time she sensed a flicker of doubt in his voice. But maybe that's part of the problem. What if I'm just using it as an excuse to avoid real intimacy? Lily leaned in, sensing that the walls he had built could be nudged aside if she pressed gently but firmly. You couldn't be more right. We all build walls to keep ourselves safe, but in doing so, we often shut out genuine connection. She took a moment, feeling the importance of what she was saying. Maybe facing our fears head-on could help us forge a new, stronger bond. He shifted on his feet, an action that seemed both defensive and contemplative. His arms crossed tightly, a posture that suggested he was caught between two worlds, the comfort of isolation and the potential for connection that was being dangled before him. All right then, he said, an edge returning to his voice. Yet the timbre hinted at intrigue rather than disdain. What's your biggest fear? Lily felt her resolve waning for a moment, her heart racing at the unexpected intimacy of the question. That I won't be enough, she disclosed, her voice trembling slightly, exposing a crack in her otherwise steadfast facade. That no matter how hard I try, I'll never break free from this feeling of inadequacy. It's suffocating. His eyes widened, and something in his demeanor shifted again. Was it empathy flooding in? He too began to wrestle openly with his stoicism. I guess I know that feeling too. Like I'm constantly measuring up to some impossible standard that just doesn't exist. A new current flowed between them, laced with urgency and vulnerability. With each shared fear, the space around them felt charged, as if they were unlocking parts of themselves that had long been dormant. She saw an emerging conflict within him, one that mirrored her own struggle with self-worth and connection. I want to know more, Ethan said, his voice lowered, almost inviting. But it's terrifying. Terrifying, yes, she acknowledged, locking eyes with him. But wouldn't you agree that growth often requires us to step outside our comfort zones? We won't get to the other side if we're too afraid to turn around and face the shadows. He hesitated, caught in the tension of his own conflicting emotions. What if those shadows engulf me? He challenged, a glimmer of genuine fear creeping into his voice. What if they don't? She countered, her heart racing at the possibilities hanging in the balance. What if we find strength in facing them together? There was silence, deep and heavy, as Ethan frowned thoughtfully, grappling with the weight of her question. The crowd around them felt like an ocean, their anticipation a rising tide pushing him closer to a precipice he hadn't known he was standing on. Maybe you're right, he admitted finally, breath hitching slightly. But this will mean confronting demons I've tried to bury, and once they resurface, we can dismantle them, she replied, conviction filling her voice. One by one. For a moment longer, silence enveloped them as weighty revelations hung in the air. With that unspoken promise, they both stood on the brink of a personal transformation. A single question loomed, pulsating like a heartbeat in a chaotic rhythm. Would they find the courage to chip away at their facades and step into the vulnerability they both quietly craved? As the atmosphere thickened with anticipation, they braced for the unknown paths laid before them, knowing that one decision could change everything. Suddenly, without warning, a figure from the crowd approached, a confident stride and piercing gaze signaling that an entirely different conflict was about to erupt, a confrontation laden with truths neither of them had expected. Lily felt the tension palpably spike in the room as a new figure stepped forward. A woman dressed in a striking marine jacket approached with an authoritative gait, her eyes scanning the crowd with a mix of determination and concern. Murmurs raced through the gathering. Who was she? Excuse me, the woman interjected, her voice commanding yet inviting. I need to take a moment to applaud Lily for stepping up today. It's not easy to share your thoughts in front of others. The genuine warmth in her voice contrasted sharply with the intensity of the preceding dialogue. But I have to ask, are you ready for what comes next? Because if you're opening up about fears, there's a whole world that awaits you. Beyond talk. Ethan shifted, and the crowd turned their full attention to the newcomer. Lily felt both anticipation and trepidation as eyes settled on her again. This wasn't just about confronting individual fears now. It was a collective moment, an echoing call to develop courage in solidarity. I'm Sergeant Harris, and I came to find out more about this gathering, the woman continued, her straight-backed posture radiating authority. I'm inspired by your initiative to connect, but remember, vulnerability doesn't always feel safe. It requires you to stand strong in your truth, even when the world feels ready to topple over. Lily felt the weight of Harris's gaze envelop her, urging her to respond. What had already felt like an intimate conversation was now widening into a community effort, ready to touch lives beyond her own. I think, Lily began, drawing from an inner well of confidence, that being vulnerable is just the first step. If we're willing to own our struggles, we can create a ripple effect of understanding and strength, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. She exhaled deeply, the gravity of her words igniting determination. Absolutely, Harris encouraged, nodding. But be prepared. The journey that unfolds from this can get intimidating. Real engagement requires a willingness to face not just your fears, but also the fears of others. Have you thought about what's at stake? The question rang clear. What did it mean for Lily to take this step, not just for herself, but for her community? This was no longer solely an endeavor of personal growth, but a chance to inspire a collective movement. Yes, I have, she replied, locking eyes with Ethan, feeling the pulse of their connection deepen. It means more than I first imagined. It's about creating a network of support that extends beyond the fear. About showing everyone that while we might be afraid, we are not alone. Together we can build resilience that can change our circumstances. Ethan nodded, his initial skepticism morphing into affirmation. That shift in perspective might just change everything, huh? He said, a hesitant smile breaking through. Exactly. If we stop hiding, we can start healing, Lily affirmed, her voice growing stronger. We can challenge stigma, promote understanding, and foster connection. It's about unlocking potential by confronting our fears and showcasing what happens when we truly let ourselves be seen. The crowd buzzed with new energy, voices lifting in a swell of agreement. It wasn't just Lily's initiative anymore. It had become a movement fueled by shared experiences. Sergeant Harris, will you help us? An enthusiastic voice called out from the back of the hall. Show us how to channel all this into something real? Lily felt a rush of exhilaration. This was the moment she had hoped for, a tangible acknowledgement of what she had envisioned, a support network to perpetuate understanding and collective encouragement. Of course I will, Harris replied. But let's understand it won't be easy. Transformation is messy, and it takes work. I'm willing to work, Lily asserted, her determination unfaltering. We are all willing. A collective cheer erupted, each voice a distinct note in an emerging symphony of connection. Here, in this community hall, they were not just a group of isolated individuals. They were a chorus ready to take action. With this burgeoning commitment, each person was stepping into a space of vulnerability paved with courage, a foundation for collective healing and support. Hearts swelling with new purpose, Lily felt a profound connection with her fellow attendees as they shared an understanding. This was about more than fear. They were cultivating hope, each interacting story nurturing strength that would propagate further into their lives. As the meeting concluded, there was an air of excitement and unity. Lily stood taller. The fear that had once gripped her like a vice had transformed into solid confidence. She had proven that she could spark change, not just for herself, but for her entire community. In this chapter of her life, she had achieved something immeasurable, a burgeoning network of care, understanding, and bravery. Beyond fears that once paralyzed her, Lily had forged a path toward meaningful connection and authentic acceptance. This was no longer the girl hiding from her fears. This was a young leader unearthing potential everywhere she looked. As she glanced towards Ethan, still standing beside her, a new possibility emerged. They were both on the brink of a new dawn in a personal evolution, each poised to step into roles that would guide the way for countless others. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but it promised to be just as rich with personal growth and fulfillment. Together, they had turned fear into conversation, isolation into connection, and in that metamorphosis lay their true power. As Lily stepped into the light of possibility, the urgency to act reverberated in her heart. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about them all, ready to take their first steps toward a shared destiny. The world awaited, and they were prepared to embrace whatever it had to offer. Now is your moment. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This journey of transformation has just started. Leave a like now to help us reach others bravely navigating their own lives. Share this video immediately with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and experience the power of connection and vulnerability. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. Your community needs this message. Join us as we encounter more stories of personal overcoming together.